All right. Hello and welcome to a very special episode of the Mike Sennello Show. In the middle of the week, yes, we are going to be interviewing New Milford Mayor Pete Bass, who's the incumbent mayor, who's running for re-election, of course, this year. This is actually going to kick off my interview series. We've got some other candidates lined up. For example, this Sunday night, you guys can check out my interview with Eric Hansel, who's running for the Board of Education. And that'll start at 7 p.m. I'll get a link out to that video as soon as I can, hopefully be done by tomorrow. We're talking to some other folks. If you are running for office here in 2021 in New Milford, reach out to me. Let me know. Love to have you on the show. So without further ado, we will get to your questions and answers at the end. But without further ado, let's bring on our illustrious mayor. Mayor Bass, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Mike, thanks for having me today on the show. Appreciate it.
So, Pete, how can people reach and follow you? First things first.
So a couple different ways. So as the mayor of New Milford, there's a few ways. First, you can follow me on the mayor Facebook page here. Also, if you want to get in contact with me via Twitter, I have the Twitter handle as well, which is at Town Council Pete, because I had the Twitter before I was mayor on that site. Also via email. You can email me at pbass, the letter P as in Pete, Bass, at newmilford.org. Now, as far as the campaign itself, you can also go to Bass and then the number 4, mayor.com. So bassformayor.com, www.bassformayor.com. And there you can see the website. And then there's a click down at the bottom for contact, and you can contact the team there. We're glad to get to you. And then also going back to the mayor, if you have any questions and you feel free to want to contact me on my cell phone, you can do that at 203-788-2619 or the office phone, 860-355-6010.
More guts than I have handing out your personal cell phone, Pete. All right, so we will get to your live Q&A. I see people are just starting to file in. So remember, this interview is going to be capped with your audience Q&A. So if you guys have some questions for Pete, they can be tough questions. We'll get them through. Anyone who wants to watch is welcome to watch. Anyone who wants to join in this conversation is welcome to join in. We will cap our conversation with the mayor, which we're hoping to be around an hour or so, with your audience Q&A. So this is your chance to get unfettered access to the mayor with the protection of the screen in front of you to ask brutally hard questions. And Mayor Bass is here to answer the most difficult of questions. So we will take those questions from anyone. But like I said, we will get to them at the end. So if you have those questions, get them in now so you don't forget. And we'll get to them towards the end. So Pete, we've done this before. Anyone who hasn't seen, you can go to my Facebook page or to my YouTube channel and just search for Mayor Bass. And you'll find our previous interviews. So as we have always done, we're going to do some things that we probably already know the answers to. And this is just kind of as a way, if nothing else, to kick off the series. So folks at home that I've sent the invite to, if they're unsure if they want to come along, just to get an idea of how these sort of things go. So before we get into our candidates, I always want people at home to get to know the person before we get into the candidate. So we're going to briefly start about Pete. And I'm going to ask you the question that you've already answered for me before, but it's been a while. So this is the same question I'm going to ask everybody who comes on. And this is how we're going to start our conversation. Pete, what brought you to New Milford?
What brought me to New Milford was I had several businesses, and one of them started here in New Milford. And that was Kent Royal Tobacco. That was across the street from Willow Springs. And then we purchased Read and Smoke, and we turned that into Archway News. So it was the the two businesses I had in here in New Milford, and then saw how wonderful this town was and saw how the community responds to stuff, and just wanted to be a part of New Milford and the green and the community. And it's just a very special place. So I was able to make it home for the last, I think, 34 years now. 34.
So that would be 87-ish?
Around there, yeah.
All right. It's been a while.
It's been a while, exactly.
Yeah. So what then, since you moved to New Milford, what then got you spurred into politics? What was the event that got you into that?
The event was I had a few people say, why don't you get involved on a board or a commission? And I was like, I really don't have the time. And then my wife, Tammy, just, was very profound had just said, you know what, the community has done a lot. They come and they support your store, they support you. You need to give back. I said, you know what, she's absolutely right. So I offered and was put on zoning board of appeals. That was my first board, and saw that local government can really be the one that affects people the most is locally, and saw how good things can happen with people that work together, and then just kept on going from there, just trying to help our community that I love so much. Best town in the USA.
Best town in the USA. So a lot of what you said
Amen.
actually speaks to why I started my show. Actually, was you're right. Local politics is where you have the greatest impact on your daily life. That's why this show talks about New Milford and the issues that are specific to New Milford. You won't hear us talk about things like immigration or border control because we're in New Milford, Connecticut. That's not really an issue here. So segueing from generally getting involved in politics, you are now the mayor, and you first ran in 2017. What event made you decide to run in 2017?
I think in 2017, it was just wanted to see the town go in a different direction than the previous administration had. Wanted to really bring forth some of the things that I talked about. One was infrastructure that I felt was extremely important. Our road system really hadn't had the capital put into it for many, many years. So really concentrating on our road systems, our bridges, our roofs, and looking at different ways to harness new technologies to help solve those problems and make it more efficient. And then looking at town government as a whole and seeing if there is a way that we could operate in kind of a different lane, make it more transparent, make it more accountable to our taxpayers, and make it more efficient. And with the hard work of our town employees who've done a phenomenal job, I think we've really come a long way since I first took office. And you can see that in the metrics of whether we have our potholes filled, to the roads themselves getting done, library construction's happening. You can see it in our investments, our interest rates that we pay on our debt, both our bands, which are bond anticipation notes, which are the smaller time frame amortization notes, to our full-fledged 20-year bonds that we're getting our interest rates at or below some of the AAA towns that are in Fairfield County.
Yeah, we'll have some time later on to go more into the specifics of that. But basically, the campaign was running on infrastructure. So what's the main campaign platform this time around then?
So we continue with the progress that we're doing on infrastructure, and also kind of expanding that too, is really making New Milford as a true holistic community, also making it and continue to making it a safe town. And what do I mean by safe town? So first, you talk about crime. So you talk about the safety of your house or the safety of yourself or your family members. And talking with Chief Cerruto, year over year, we're down 16.7% as far as crime, and then 32% crimes against persons. So that's a big kudos to our New Milford Police Department, our residents at large as well. So that's one part of safe. Another part of the safe, of being a safe community as well, is what can we do to help those in need? And some of the things is, let's first start with the drug problem that New Milford has, as well as the rest of the country. So it's been a tsunami we talked about in the very beginning. Some towns put their head in the sand and say, you know what, that's a big, huge national problem. I don't have the resources, I'm kind of just going to ride it out. Well, New Milford, we don't do that. We addressed it head on. We created a new position, which Mike, I know you know about. That's our community care coordinator. Justin Coleman has just done a fabulous job. We house Justin within the police department kind of organization as well, but obviously he works with our social services team, our senior center. He works with all of our town government and nonprofits. And the data shows how unbelievable Justin's done. So kind of a couple of the markers are addiction, overdoses are down 50% year over year. Homelessness, we're down to very, very few, if at all. And getting the people in need resources, we've become much faster and much more nimble, and that's created a lot of results. So we've seen that that's kind of boots on the ground has been very successful. I've now asked the town council, because we're getting American relief funds, and I know Mike will talk about that a little bit more.
We're going to talk about that later, trust me.
Yep. So I had asked some of that money to be portioned for a 2-year trial program on a new person that will help with domestic violence and family crisis, which will be boots on the ground to really address that need as well. Also, really working with community support, whether it be our nonprofits or whether it be the community at large through their generous donations, Mike, especially through this pandemic so far, where we have our community food bank, as well as our other nonprofit food banks, Carmela's Cupboard, you have our food bank, you have the United Methodist Church, you have Faith Church, you have Walnut Creek, you have Walnut Creek Church, you have bunches of those. And how we're able, for those that need food assistance, we're able to help with that. Also, I had asked Mark Mankin at Sullivan Farms, could we as a town farm give more of our produce to help those? And we gave almost a ton of food last year. Now this year will be about 1.5 tons food.
Cool.
Also through the generous donations, Mike, of our citizenry, our fuel bank has never been as robust as it was last year through wonderful donations. I know Tim Clark raised almost over $20,000 for that fuel assistance with this wonderful Christmas that he does, family vacation that he does each and every year. That he does up there off of the farm, Sullivan Farm.
Yeah.
So he does a wonderful thing. So we're really approaching safety in that respect, being safe. Also safe is giving people opportunity. Opportunity is the seed of being able to do better for yourself, your family, your community. And when that happens, we become a more safe town. And some of the things we're doing with that is we partnered with the Northwest Investment Workforce Board, where we're having an actual delegate of theirs come out, a worker, once a month and talk about careers, job placement. So that you may not have a job, but there may be an opportunity for you, or to get the training that you need to get a better job. So this is the second month that they've been up here. They're actually up here today. So that's great. Also, looking at a financial literacy class. And before I got on here, Mike, with Ivana Butera, our social services director, we started this class. It's our first initial class. And we're talking about everything from credit, how your credit is important, to budgeting, to creating wealth through investment. And once they're done with their class, they'll get a certification. And in partnership with United Way, they're going to donate some funds to start their first bank account, as well as in partnership with Savings Bank of Danbury. So using all those three kind of levers, P3, which is called a public-private partnership, we're able to leverage that and create the opportunity, kind of the first rung for people to understand those processes and give themselves a better life. So those are kind of, I could keep going if you want me to, Mike.
I was going to let you, Pete, but that's one hell of an answer to the first question here about what your campaign platform is going to be for this time around. And yeah, like I said, I'm happy to let you go if that's what you wanted to do. We've got a lot of questions to get to, and I'm sure we can cover a lot of those topics, I'm sure, with some of these answers.
Absolutely. So that's kind of the tranche of safe. There's more to that as well. That's kind of the highlight so far.
Super. So this time around, before we get into more specific stuff, this time around, if you get elected, it'll be your third consecutive successful election. It'll be 6 years of Pete Bass. So Pat Murphy ran 7 times, got elected 6. The Charter Revision Commission, I'm sure you remember all of this, briefly touched up and brought up on the idea of term limits. They thought it was kind of too hot button of a topic to ensure that they'd actually get the thing passed. And it was really not something that they were torn on. So they didn't want to pass that on to the voters. They wanted to get the important stuff through, and then if we have to revisit that again. And we will talk about the Charter Revision Commission in greater detail. But just in general, are you a fan of term limits?
So now this is going to be a political yes or no, Mike, so you're going to laugh. So
sure.
I do believe at some point there should be term limits, whether the public decides to say enough or you yourself. So I do think that this should not be a lifetime career. Absolutely not. Now, I do think that while there are things that I believe that we should continue to do with partnership with our boards and commissions and our taxpayers and our residents, I still think there's a lot more to do. And with the good graces of our residents here, if they want to keep going and say, Pete, we're going to give you another couple of years, well, let's go.
So what would make you not want to run then?
What would make me not want to run is seeing most of the things or the goals accomplished. Would be would be the main focus on that. Making sure a lot of the things that we've started have been completed. So I'd really be working on those things. So it'd be making sure that our roads are way up to where we want to be, our bridges, our infrastructure work. Also, I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit later too, some of the revitalization that we're going to be looking to do.
Yep. The riverfront's
some of the,
on here.
Yep, some of the sports fields, all these wonderful Century Brass and the opportunity of Century Brass, Public Works, with the taxpayers' approval, moving that over there. And then looking at the other buildings, whether they be John Pettibone or East Street School. So there's a lot of stuff going on that and is going to be going on for quite some time. So I'd like to see these things get accomplished and done. And then I can, hang my hat up.
Super. So before we move on to our next series of topics here, just want to talk to the people at home. Please do share this video. Again, this is your first opportunity to effectively, if only virtually, meet the candidates, because we'll talk about the Meet the Candidates events in person coming up soon. But folks at home, do share this. Again, we're going to do a live Q&A. We will get to your audience. We are just kind of warming Pete up here right now. So the more difficult questions are to come. Trust me. If you think I'm softballing Pete, fair. Get your question in, and we will read it at the end. If it's a tough question, then Pete will have to answer a tough question. So, we try to engage in civility, but again, if you want people to see this, if you want people to have direct, unfettered access to Mayor Bass, this is the opportunity to do it. So please do share this video. Don't forget to share this. One quick thing that Pete mentioned that I kind of have to get out that's from my perspective here, just so folks know, yes, I do own a media production company, Taylor Media, and we have been working with the town to film and broadcast the town council meetings. So everybody knows, since I'm the operator there, I can only pay like 50% attention to the town council meetings' actual content because I'm, running around. Pete's seen it before. So just so folks know, my attention at these town council meetings is only like 50%. I usually have to go back afterwards and watch them. Which you guys can do on the town's YouTube channel. We'll be bringing that back up too, but the town does have a YouTube channel, Town of New Milford. A lot of the things that we're going to be bringing up are on that website, on that channel, so everything can be confirmed there. So remember, share this video, and now we're going to get into Pete's general views, and we'll go over his tenure, and then talk about things looking forward. And some of that's going to be some tougher questions, but Pete, just in terms of your broad views, what do you think of the mayor, the role of the mayor is or just should be, just in general?
I think the role of the mayor in general should be one that helps cast the vision, kind of the mission statement for the tenure that you are mayor. So one of the things as mayor here, I talked to our department heads and said that, we're going to be a high performance organization here, that our boss, my boss, is the taxpayers, the residents of New Milford. And we're going to do everything we possibly can to make sure that the return on investment that our taxpayers, our hardworking taxpayers who pay their town taxes, get the best bang for the buck. So we look at that kind of in that paradigm is how we look at decisions. And I'll give you kind of a quick example. I know, Mike, I've said this a million times, right? So the Pothole Machine. So we looked at different ways of how it was before we bought the Pothole Machine. It was about 6 different people going in and putting in what's called cold patch because the asphalt plants were closed. You then would put it in there, and then they would run over it with a tire or try and stamp it down. And then within an hour later, I get the phone call from residents saying, Pete, I drove over there. Now the pothole's back. What the heck is going on? This is crazy. And a lot of phone calls I got in the very beginning were due to potholes. So he said, is there a different way? Is there a better way? So we found that Pothole Machine. And Mike, we've done over 50,000 potholes. And that machine takes one person. They use kind of a toggle switch in the cab. The first button then, what it does is it blows out the moisture. The second button puts the tap coat, which is the glue. And the third one puts the emulsion down, the emulsifier. And what that has is it's like steel, almost like an iron, so to speak, in a way. They don't break up And what that's done is it resulted in allowing us then to move our manpower to other things, whether it be sight line,
Have you had to redo
mowing.
Have you had to redo any of those potholes?
Mike, not that I'm aware of. There may be one or two that may have happened, but those are not that I'm aware of. And it's been so successful that we've had the state come in and look at it. We've had other towns, even towns from New York, come in and look at it and see the real benefit to the machine and what it's been able to do to help us here in New Milford.
So how about the town council then? Because the town council is like an extension. So we're a town meeting style of government still, where the town council is just an extension of the legislative body, which is all the voters. So how about the relationship between the mayor and town council? And you can go into the relationship at meetings, how you envision that. What is the role of the mayor in relationship to town council?
Well, I think the role of the mayor is, if you're looking at it in an organization such as a business, so to speak, so that those in the audience can kind of see the difference. So you have the mayor who does the day-to-day operations, and then you have your board of directors, so to speak, which is your town council. They do the legislative body. They put in the rules, so to speak, and they make sure that we keep within the guardrails of the rules. And they also listen to the people because they're out there. There's 9 other people. They hear from their constituents and what they believe that they need. And we talk about all this at the town council. And the whole thing is to just trying to work together how we can make it better for our taxpayer in all sorts of different ways.
So then is the mayor beholden to town council?
So the town council itself can vote on pretty much legislatively whatever that they so choose per the charter. So they could make recommendations, whether it be putting in a new ordinance or a new regulation. That's what they can do. The day-to-day operations of the town per the charter are to the mayor, but the mayor also gives updates to the town council. If the town council, especially I have some council people that are very in tuned to the public, and then they'll email or call me or talk to me and just say, I've heard this is an issue. Let's work on doing this to make it happen for our residents.
So I wanted to ask you a few questions about the things that you've done so far and your accomplishments, as you kind of extolled on all that for quite some time now. So we're going to go ahead and just skip those questions and move on to your tenure.
Sure.
So the reason we're going to talk about the past 4 years of you being in office is because it informs what to expect moving forward. And I think that's what people should be voting on. It's not necessarily the past 4 years, but what to expect moving forward. And the last 4 years have allow us to make that decision, I think, in a more informed manner. So the first 2 years were dominated by the community center and the charter revision process. From my perspective as a person who would be voting in November. Before we get into that, for everyone at home, check out my video called The Community Center Adventure. It's on my YouTube channel. It's on my Facebook page. It goes into great detail, the whole history of the entire situation, going back years. It did stop. I released it in, I think it was 2019. So it's up to date as of whenever I released it in 2019. I don't want to get into the history here. That's a great resource you guys can check out. And it expands upon my thoughts on the matter too. So you can get an idea of where I stand on all of that. So check that out. It's the Community Center Adventure. Before we get into the Community Center, I did mention the Charter Revision. Is there anything you'd like to add about the Charter Revision Commission? Because that was something that took almost an entire year and affected the town charter. And it's something that we're I think it affects the town at such a fundamental level from a political standpoint that I think it's something that's really worth mentioning here. If there's any more further thoughts you have on that whole Charter Revision Commission.
Well, first and foremost, Mike, I'd like to thank the community because it was a true community effort. Those that served on that committee, thank them for all of their efforts. That was a tall task to do, to really review the charter. I do think that we should look at that every 4 to 5 years, look at it and see how we can update it. Yeah. Absolutely, see how we can update it as times change, technology changes, how all that works. Maybe we don't change anything, or maybe we change a couple things, but I think we as the public should be looking at the charter within that type of time frame.
So it was 2018 that whole process took place. So we're thinking what, like 2022, 2023, somewhere in that area, you do it again. Yeah, because we're not obligated to review it more more often than every 10 years. Do I have that correct? So you
Correct.
would want to see it more often than that. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. So that's basically it on the Charter Revision Commission. You guys can check that out too. I did several videos on that. But let's move on to the community center, because this is something that was a massive topic in the first tenure, in the first term here, and it's starting to come back up. So without really getting into the history, because like I said, we went into great detail on that video. It's a 2-hour-long video. I spent weeks and weeks and weeks researching and editing that video. So you guys checked out that video. What has become of the whole community center situation? The committee, the idea, what's become of all that?
So the committee was formed, and the committee came up with their recommendations, which they presented to the town council. Then we were going to be looking at the uses of both John Pettibone and of East Street School. And then we had the pandemic hit. So right now, what is John Pettibone? John Pettibone right now is our vaccine center. It's where we give the vaccines. It's where we're also going to be giving our flu vaccine as well. And it's where we've housed when we've needed during emergency events, where we've needed free Wi-Fi access. We've allowed that to come in. And whereas, you know, some of our different agencies are in as well. So that kind of put off, and has continued to put off, really more of the dialogue as it has been on Pettibone, as we still don't know, pandemic-wise, what's going to happen. We don't know if there's going to be a different variant that's going to be coming out that would require additional vaccinations. Right now, we've been told that when we got our first doses, now we're being told that because of the variant, now we're going to have to do boosters, which I like to segue real quick. If you've had the Pfizer vaccine, 65 or older, or if you are immune compromised, or if your employment is one that's front facing, where you're involved with a lot of people and that could be a risk to your health, you then can get a booster shot with Pfizer. So if you have a Pfizer, you can get a Pfizer. You can go to the website, www.milford.org. There's going to be the red banner there. You can click there to register. Now you can walk in as well, but to register is really the faster, most efficient way for you. It's a very, very easy process. So right now, kind of segueing back into that, as we're doing flu vaccines, regular vaccines, we don't know what is going to happen. So kind of that's been put on hold as we're trying to debate that. Now, are we still using John Pettibone? Absolutely. We're using it as the vaccine center. We're using it for Park and Rec. We're using it for some of our nonprofits that use it. So we're continuing on with that. And then I like to segue, Mike, I don't know if you have it in there now, but East Street School. So East Street School is another building that really hasn't been used up to its full potential, and will need repair of that as well. Currently, the Board of Education is the only entity that's in there. And right now they're contemplating what they want to do, where they're going to want to move or stay. So until we kind of get all that information from the Board of Education as to what that's going to be, costs and whatnot, those two buildings right now are kind of on hold or on pause until we can really get a better assessment from where they want to move the Board of Education on East Street, and COVID as far as Pettibone.
So we can get into more of the facility itself that is John Pettibone, and what's happening with facilities moving forward here, because we're going to talk about, you know, what to look forward to, and we are going to talk about riverfront revitalization, which I think naturally relates to all of that. But when
and Mike, just
go ahead.
Sorry about that. And one other thing too is, just so that people are aware, a lot of times a lot of misinformation, which I hope we'll definitely be able to clear up tonight, is posted on social media. So that's a lot of people that are kind of doing Monday morning quarterbacking. The best thing to do if you have a question is call here or talk to your town councilman. So, and why I'm even saying that in this respect as to right now is, nothing will happen to these buildings until the town has a meeting on it or a referendum on either one of these buildings. Nothing is going to happen until that happens. Just as I talked about in the very first election, the same thing has not changed at all. What has changed, obviously, is the timeline, and that's because the country is still in a pandemic.
Yeah, we're going to get to both of those topics in greater detail later on. So, As far as the community center is concerned, the committee dissolved in, I think it was 2019. So it was almost a full year before the pandemic that the committee had dissolved. So you were pretty firm at one of these committee meetings about their failure to provide requested information to the town council when they were making their presentations. Do you want to talk about the dissolution of the committee and your thoughts on whether or not it'd be useful or whether you'd like to see that committee reestablished at some point?
So I think the committee served its purpose, which they went in and they did their due diligence and came up with some of the recommendations and some of the costs. I think when we can have a more robust conversation concerning the building, we need to have way more information when it comes to the public. For instance, what the true cost would be to bring this up to ADA compliant and current code, what that would look like, what the building would look like, what would be housed in there, what opportunities could we have at Pettibone, and then the uses, the big uses. For instance, right now, COVID's not going away. COVID's going to be here for a very long time. And what does that look like? So that's going to be talking with our health director, talking with, these are things that we would have never thought or seen of prior to COVID, but now it makes all the sense in the world. So it's really going through all those machinations and then having public input as to when we go through this, how this looks, what it looks like, and then how are we going to pay for it? So this is something that we definitely need to address. But as of right now, I mean, as this thing is, Pettibone is a vaccine clinic, we really couldn't discuss the long-term parts of it because we don't know what the strategic input of the vaccine clinic is going to be on Pettibone until we can tackle this variant and get it under control.
Well, to that effect, though, one of the questions that the committee was tasked with, and that you made very clear in several of their meetings, is that they were the community center committee. The words John and Pettibone did not appear in their name for a reason. So one of the big questions that I don't think they properly really answered was, what is a community center? What does the town of New Milford conceive of when they hear the words community center? And does it have to actually be at John Pettibone? And I think that actually segues to my next questions, which is, what are your thoughts on the library modernization serving a number of those purposes as a community center?
So that's a great question, Mike. I was actually going into that. So again, as we're seeing in hindsight's 2020, we are seeing that we're going through library construction right now. And that library should be online, we're hoping, the third week of January. That's the day that we should be getting our CO and opening up. And it has a lot of community space that's built into there. We have meeting space anywhere from 100 and some people all the way down to our tutor rooms that have 2 people in there. So there's going to be plenty of additional space for our residents and nonprofits and community agencies to be able to use within the library. But right now, as that's being built out, Lorna and her team are kind of assessing what their needs are going to be in the library as well. But that brings in a lot of space, community space that will be online for the town, which is great. And by no means does that differentiate Pettibone, the community, or any other community center, because that could allow for additional things. And what's great is this allows us to have a different conversation when it comes to what we thought this would be a couple years ago to what it could be. But as I said, to me, to do the real proper due diligence, the first thing we need to know right away is a couple of things. One, what does this look like as far as COVID and the vaccine clinic? Because right now that's taking up, when the clinic is on, that takes up the gym, that takes up the old kitchen, cafeteria, and it also takes up the old part of the library as well, where we store the vaccines. So to really have a robust conversation, we really need to know kind of what's going to be happening town-wise as far as that clinic.
So real quick, just a quick yes or no. You said one of the rooms seems to be capable of housing over 100 people. That's more than the EPAL art room holds. So would you ever consider moving the town council meetings to the more modern facility?
That's a great question, Mike. I think that we could have a great conversation. Ask the library board of trustees there too. I definitely think we should do a few up there. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool as a kickoff, if you will.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think
So
that'd be awesome.
moving on to your next term. So we just talked about the community center. We talked about the charter revision. Those were topics that dominated your first term. So in this second term, it's been one topic and one topic only, and that's been COVID. So folks at home, if you got tough questions about COVID, go ahead and ask them. If we lose the stream midstream, it's out of my control. Sorry, folks. I'll do my best to make sure that they aren't, I'll do my best to rephrase the ones that I think need to be rephrased, but still get the point across, so that we don't get zucked or kicked off of YouTube here. But hey, that's where we are. So we're going to talk. Go ahead.
Hey, Mike, as we begin this, as we're waiting for some of the questions when it's COVID, sitting in the mayor's seat, I'm just in awe of our first responders, our teachers, our paraeducators, administrators, our fire, police that are our first responders, our ambulance, our medical community, just our CERT team, just everybody through this pandemic, just their selflessness and coming out for the benefit of our community. It's been amazing to see. And everybody pulling together, those that went down, as we talked about a little bit before, giving their money, their food or whatever to our food bank, our fuel banks, making sure that, those in need are helped out. And even small gestures, Mike, like people paying it forward at their favorite coffee place. Or when the police, we did then the fire with Chief Squires, when he rang the bell just about every night when we were going through the real depths of COVID, and then doing those community parades and birthday parades for everybody to just try and keep some of that semblance of community. And then what's really great to see now is, as we've been able to loosen up some of the restrictions with Governor Lamont's reductions in some as well, been able to see people coming back and enjoying some of the wonderful festivities we have in New Milford, whether it be our concerts, whether it be the Apple Fest or River Fest, coming in and just enjoying themselves and seeing that. And also, the school, they had to learn a whole new way of teaching, which was the remote learning for a year. And now having the kids come back 5 days a week, it's great to see that, bringing a little more normalcy. So it's just a true partnership with everybody during this pandemic. And we couldn't do it without anybody. It was everybody working together as we continue to go through this.
So the questions I'm going to ask you as it relates to COVID are going to be your role when it relates to COVID, because I don't think the voters are going to care about the COVID itself. We're talking about, how to decide in November. So
absolutely,
that's why I've kind of geared the questions the way I have. So I'm not going to ask you whether you think vaccines work or not. I'm not going to ask you, about the efficacy of masks or anything like that. But we're going to talk about those sort of topics as it relates to the role of the mayor. And folks, if you have some tough questions about COVID, I know this has been a topic that has divided households. So go ahead, do share this video if you think it's important to get out. We'll be able to get to the mayor's thoughts here on his role with COVID in just a second. And again, if you've got those tough questions as it relates to COVID, get them in now before you forget, because we'll get to them at the end of the show. We'll go right through them. So Pete, before we actually get started with the COVID, it looks like we're going to run over. You got time to hang out?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So I want to start off with where COVID started as it relates to your role and some of the things that happened that changed in the town politic and changed in the office of the mayor. One of the things that you wound up doing away with, which I really liked, but maybe you had to do away with it, was the coffee with the mayor. And what seems to have replaced it are these Wednesday night conversations. And at the beginning of the meeting, it seems like the beginning of in March of last year, it seems like your updates, your virtual updates, seem to naturally segue into those Wednesday night meetings. So can you talk about those virtual meetings and how that has come to effectively replace the coffee with the mayor?
So great question, Mike. We when March happened during COVID, really the governor put down, as we all remember, significant reductions where it was he had certain number of people that were allowed into buildings. Those that went out of state had to self-quarantine. A lot of our medical community really hadn't had a handle yet on COVID and what response we could have to that. Vaccines weren't then available at the time. And also they were coming out when trying to try different medications. So our thought process was, to make sure we didn't do the coffee with the mayor, because a lot of times, well, we had a number of people in E. Paul Martin, but obviously I would go to a corner and speak to people one-on-one, and we wouldn't have that availability to do that 6-foot social distancing. Also, the health department was very concerned at that particular time. We were even telling residents, when you go to the grocery store, wipe off your groceries. So the thought was to, have somebody have open containers of coffee as well at that particular time. Just didn't seem to make sense. So we decided to pivot and do the virtual town hall meeting where we could do it remotely, tell our residents kind of what was going on as far as COVID numbers and what the town was doing. And then Governor Lamont had brought in his first emergency order, which was a very broad-based one that also allowed town first selectmen or mayors to piggyback off of some of that stuff as well. For instance, one of them real quick is the restaurants, where we put in the outside dining to help them stay in business. So it allow us to be a little more nimble to help during this pandemic.
So those virtual updates. Where did the idea for that come from? Because I want to say that those are the most watched videos on the entire town, on the town's entire YouTube channel, with the exception of a handful of meetings in 2017, at the end of 2017. Those are by far the most watched videos on the town's YouTube channel. And you weren't streaming to Facebook at the time. What I was actually doing was at home capturing your videos on YouTube and pumping them out to Facebook as unfettered as I possibly could, so that people who watch on Facebook, those videos are some of my most watched videos as well, both in terms of live and after the fact. So can you talk about like the thought process to get into that and how that kind of transitioned into the more regular conversations?
Sure. So we began to say, how can we reach our residents in a safe manner, where you have electronics technology, where it could help assist with that. And we thought of doing these virtual town hall meetings. And obviously, Mayor Mark Boughton had his show that he was doing quite successfully as well. And then you had state and federal governments doing their updates as well. And it just seemed to make sense for us locally to kind of zero in on New Milford itself and kind of offer that information, especially in early COVID response, what was going on, how we were seeing it here in New Milford, and giving that information to our residents here in New Milford and beyond. We actually were getting some messages and emails from people outside of town and other towns, saying thank you, because they were able to get that information as well. So I was just trying to get as much information to our public as we possibly could, and continue to do so. It's kind of morphed a little bit different, where we still do some COVID now, but do a lot more community stuff as well, to just continue to keep our residents informed. And the goal is to come back to Coffee with the Mayor, and we're hoping we can do that shortly.
Super. So the technology, as for anyone who has watched, has improved and has been a learning adventure, I would say,
Absolutely.
from the beginning. And Grant, if you're watching, like, everything's gotten better. It seems like you guys have a way of doing things. And with that notion of growing pains technologically as it relates to virtual meetings, virtual conversations, one of the things that became a major topic of issue last summer was the conversion from the in-person meetings to the virtual town council meetings. So can you talk about, from a technology standpoint, a little bit of the behind the scenes stuff? Because there's been a lot of speculation as to, there were a lot of complaints when it first launched and how that went about. Can you talk a little about the behind the scenes when it comes to the virtual town council meetings last summer?
Sure. So when we first started, obviously this was new to everyone. We were looking at, how do you migrate and how many people would be watching the town council meetings? In the very beginning, we had to make sure that we had the technology in place, the webinar series, because we didn't know if 2,000 people would show up, if 10,000 people would show up, or 2 people would show up. But we wanted to make sure we had the technology in place to do the larger one. And with that one, we had a more, as Mike, as you know, we had a more sophisticated system within that, and a platform. And obviously, it was more sophisticated on the back end here, but also to the public, which made it much more difficult as well. So as we were trying to migrate the process and hearing from the public, we changed platforms where we made it easier for our public to interact with us and come in with us. And so those are just learning curves as we continue to migrate through the system. And I think we've got better and better at it. It's become, more of a second recourse now, as we're doing it right now together, where in the very beginning, it would have been a little more difficult as it is today.
So what happened with the captions? Why weren't captions available? So you started off with the go-to platform, and then we got a lot of complaints. And I was in on a lot of this because a lot of people reached out to me and said, Mike, why aren't you the one doing all of this from a technology standpoint? A lot of people, I'm sure, reached out to you and said, drop my name. So there's been a lot of conversations between, me and the IT director, Dave Watson, about all of this. So what happened with the captions? Why were closed captions not available at first? And what was the transition period? Why did it take so long?
So closed captions, and I preface this by I'm not a technology wizard at all. From YouTube, when these were being recorded, YouTube already had a feature where you could do the closed captioning. We then had one resident come on and said that they wanted to see that as a live version. So we went about trying to figure out, as you said, Mike, with making sure that we have that availability to do that. And I'm happy to say that we do that now. There are quite a few towns that don't even have that. So it was been from the response of our community that we were able to actually make it better. And I think that's what's great is we take, some of the ideas and some of the concerns and issues, and we look at a way to make it happen and fix it. And I'm happy to say we were able to do that.
So with those virtual town council meetings, there was some complaints of unfair muting. You want to address those right now?
Absolutely.
Go ahead. So there were some complaints about unfair muting. Who was in charge of all of that? How has that transitioned? If you want to talk about my role in all of that, you're welcome to do so. Go ahead.
So we had some conjecture of people saying that there was purposeful muting, which there absolutely was not. We want to hear from everybody. Everybody's voice should be heard. Absolutely. So we wanted to do to guarantee that was I had asked Mike to come on and kind of be the driver for our town council meetings so that we could make sure that no one got muted. Or if there was an issue, we could rectify it as Mike, as he tells you, when he's at the town council meeting, he's going back and forth on this technology, making sure that it all works. Where in the beginning, we didn't really have that model, so to speak, and everybody was learning from it. So we, like I said, we've took the advice of our residents and concerns and, made it a better process, of which, Mike, you're part of it, and I can't thank you enough for that. And like we said before, if there's anything else that you want to see in the process that you think is better, we'd love to hear from you too. You can email me at pbass@newmilford.org or mayor@newmilford.org. We'd love to hear from you. And, going back and forth with ideas just makes the process better.
Yep. And that's kind of what I've been talking about. I've done some things that were never done before, like having the lower thirds, having the title so that when we're talking about a topic at town council meetings, people can follow along if they jump in midstream so they know what's being discussed. I've done things like in post going back and putting timestamps in the YouTube video so you can jump straight to a topic. If you're not interested in topics 1 through 8, you can go into topic 9 and boom, you're right there to talk about, let's say, to hear the COVID update from Dr. Jeremy Levin, right? If that's what you're interested, you can just go straight to that. But one of the features of the virtual meeting that's really not there for the in-person meeting, it's going to be really, really difficult to actually reinstitute, was the share screen feature. So there were some things that allowed people at home to see. And one of the more controversial things that was brought up was the actual physical complaint that was brought up to the health department about what was happening over with, and I have to drop the name because I don't know how else to say this. I don't like talking about other people that aren't here to defend themselves. But with joke we're on to, when you show the actual health department complaint itself, I thought the complaint looked somewhat dubious. And of course, the health department has no choice but to follow up on it, right? Even if it is somewhat dubious. And I kind of disagreed at the time with the choice to have it as part of the share screen. And I especially disagreed with the decision to have it up as long as it was. If you're going to have it up, 2 to 3 minutes would have been sufficient, but it was up for a solid 20 to 30 minutes. Pete, do you have any regrets about showing the actual complaint itself, or do you think it was an actually necessary thing to do?
I think whenever we have people that make statements against town employees and want to have a public conversation, then the public needs to see the full information so that they can make their choice. So to me, it's I think an opportunity for people to weigh in on the conversation. I think as we've moved forward in this conversation with Mike Crespin and with Suzanne, who was our sanitarian, when it came to that complaint, you're exactly right. And that any complaint that we get, we have to go out and investigate. It's not because we want to, it's because you have to. And then another thing is we talk about time and again, I've mentioned this now, I think the second or third time, Mike, is just the misinformation. So sometimes social media, people put their own spin on there. They put their own conjecture on there. And that's why, to me, it's very important that you do your own due diligence, your own education, and then call the people. Talk to our health department team. Call or talk to me. And that way we can do it without conjecture, without issues being raised in a forum such as that.
So you stand by the decision
that
to
takes
share,
two.
Yeah, so you stand by the decision to share on the share screen the actual complaint.
I think that the complaint was conjectured through social media with different people making different allegations to it, and a lot of people were making false allegations against Mr. Crespin and against Ms. Von Holt, and I think the public needed to know the full story.
All right, then. So moving away from virtual to in-person meetings is something we did more recently. So first things first, I personally, if I was not handling the media side of things, honestly, the virtual meetings were a lot easier to deal with than for me. But if I was a town resident, I actually loved attending these meetings in person. So can you talk about the decision and where that came from to start moving away from the virtual meetings to the in-person meetings?
So first, I speak at least a couple times a day with our health director, Lisa Morrissey. And before that was with our health director, Mike Crespin, and reviewing the numbers, seeing where the cases lie, were they within family, was there community spread? We then began to see some of those reductions that we've seen. And also at that particular time, Governor Lamont's orders were going to set to be expired. And within those orders expired, then obviously the virtual meetings would expire as well. So we wanted to pivot and migrate towards going back to some more normalcy, as long as we could do it in a safe manner. And so that's kind of what we did. We then pivoted back to having our town hall meetings we have now. The public can come in and opine to the council, or they can view them through your good work, Mike. Thank you for doing that. So they have a choice. They could do that, or they could come into town hall, because the thought process always has been to kind of migrate back to some more normalcy, as long as it's safe to do so.
So on that note, real quick, for everybody watching at home, we are streaming live to my YouTube channel. If you're watching on Facebook, link is in that video's description if you want to watch on YouTube instead. If you're watching on YouTube, link is in this video's description to jump on the Facebook stream instead. So Pete, this is the first time you're hearing of this, but what I'm actually doing right now is experimenting with a dual stream, so we can stream to Facebook and YouTube simultaneously and at no cost. So
that's pretty cool.
I'll be looking into that for you guys. So if that's a feature you guys are interested in, it shouldn't add any actual cost to anything. It didn't cost me anything. It's 1 or 2 extra clicks at this point.
Awesome.
So
I like that.
Again, I'm just testing it, so I'm not set on doing it just yet. But that's something I want to bring up. So you guys at home, if you want to watch on YouTube, you can watch on YouTube. If you want to watch on Facebook, you can watch there too. So it seems to me, from what I gathered of the whole situation, was that the real impetus for moving to in-person more than anything was that it was a legal impetus. And Ned Lamont's executive orders expired. There was no legal way to even conduct a virtual meeting at that point.
Right. At that time, Mike, we had no idea that the state legislature would continue to grant his power. So we had to go on the thought process is of they're going to expire. How do we pivot? How does that look like? What does it look like? And still give the opportunity for those residents that felt a little insecure about coming into town hall to be able to still, as they did pre-COVID, to be able to watch it. And then they can opine either by emailing their council people, emailing the mayor's office, or if they want to come in, they can do so and address the town council as they had prior.
Would you object if the town council, of course, would be the legislative body making this decision, but would you object to the idea of having an ordinance that would be put forth to allow for virtual participation in these meetings, either from the public or from the councilship?
So we looked at that, and to make that happen would be more costly. And the reason for that is if we were to hold those meetings with the new orders that the governor had or within the orders, we would have to have a separate room with a separate computer with a town hall employee there watching to make sure nothing would happen to be able to view it if we had that type of setup.
That is bizarre.
Yeah, so that's part of the requisite to do that. So then we looked at that kind of cost to do that, and it just seemed right now just too cost prohibitive to do that. Now, if the state legislature would make it so that we wouldn't have to bore those type of costs, that'd be a great opportunity to do so.
Yeah, because I've demonstrated with the Board of Ed and with actually just a few weeks ago, or just last week actually, that we can do this. It's technically possible from a technology standpoint. So the last thing on these virtual meetings and the transition to the in-person meetings, if the governor's orders had remained and there was a legal method by which we could continue to have the virtual meetings the way we had them, would you have stayed virtual, or would you have still made the decision to go into in-person?
I would think as these numbers have trended down, we want to get to more normalcy. I think we would go back in person, because as the town council is able to interact in a personal level versus on a computer screen, you get a different flavor. There's more interaction within the town council than previously before, because everyone is, segmented and remotely. Now, what I would like to see is the availability for the audience to give more participation. And that's something I'm trying to work with Randy DeBello on to opine on. Could we then be able to have the best of both worlds? So that's kind of what we're looking at now. Now, we had a public meeting, right, that we were able to do that for. And the difference between a public meeting and a council meeting is council votes, where the public meeting, we were just taking the public's input. So we were able to do it that way. But when it comes to votes, and we want to make sure that when these votes count, that it can't be some kind of loophole that happened because we didn't have a space open with a computer access with a town employee there watching to make sure that nothing nefarious happened to the town equipment. So, maybe as the legislature begins their processes by looking at things, they can look at making that change, because I agree with you, technology is here to stay, and to make it more convenient for our residents and taxpayers, I think that's a great thing.
So we keep talking about Ned Lamont's executive orders here. So as folks may know or not know, it was news earlier this week. The governor has requested a 6th extension of his executive powers, emergency powers, and it was granted in a landslide. We talked about that on the last episode of the Mike Sennello Show. Guys, check that out if you're interested. We can go into that's where I went into great detail on all of that. But as those extensions continue, how much of what we see in terms of local restrictions is coming from Hartford, and how much is coming from 10 Main Street?
So most, if not all, of the restrictions would come from the governor's office. When it comes to, restrictions on certain age groups, when it comes to mask mandates, when it comes to social distancing in some respects, those are all coming from the governor's office. Or if you are in a federal building or
like
on a bus, or a bus, because of that's, so those requirements, COVID requirements are done from the federal level.
All right. So what would be like a local restriction that would come from 10 Main Street?
So a local restriction could be uh, anything from currently right now is some of the towns have a mask mandate when it comes to all of the business community where they
Do we
have,
have one?
I believe Danbury. We do not.
Okay.
So what we have is the recommendation from the CDC, which is if you're in a high dense situation, to wear a mask, which we recommend to do. But what we looked at, and I explained that to the town council, and I think on a couple of our virtual town hall meetings, when we were looking, are we going to be one that would have joined Danbury and a couple of their surrounding towns? Would we have been one to assess that as well? And then talking with Lisa, where we were seeing up here in Litchfield County, first of all, our hospitalizations are minimal for the entire county. And then we looked and said, okay, where were we seeing the real contagion? Where did we see it? And it came from really two major tranches. First, those that went on summer vacations. So they went to other states, went to a hot spot and came back and they gave it to someone within their family. The next one was they went to a family barbecue and families got together and, they gave each other COVID. And we looked at it and said, we really don't think that people are going to wear masks coming back from a family vacation, nor are they going to wear a mask when they're doing a family barbecue. What we can do is give them as much positive information as we can on a couple of things. First, the most effective way to stamp this out is to get vaccinated. We have the ability to do so both at our vaccine clinic here in New Milford and then also through the pharmacies. It'd be Big Y, Walmart, CVS. So it's the ability to really tamp that down that way. And also, you have the choice to go into a high dense place like a Big Y. And if you choose to wear your mask and stay safe, I do go into Big Y. I do go into Stop and Shop, into Walmart, our small businesses as well, and do our part to support those. And I do see people both wearing a mask and those that aren't wearing a mask. And as I've said time and again, each and every one of us should be respectful of everyone's decision as we continue to migrate through this. And the good news is right now, New Milford, we are in the yellow. We were in orange for some time, and then we dropped back down to yellow, as has some of the other towns in our area. And we will continue to monitor it and look at those things. Now, if it turns back up and we have serious cases and showing contagion throughout the community, then Lisa Morrissey and myself will reassess it. And if we have to make a pivot to that, we would do so. But as of right now, we've seen the numbers trend down. We are in yellow, and we continue to follow that CDC guidance, which is recommend.
So on that note, and I think this is a pretty straightforward question and a pretty straightforward answer, so I'm sure we can be brief about this one question here. There's been a lot of contention as to stuff that's happening in the classroom, mask mandates, vaccine mandates, being bandied about. Just real quick, the role of the mayor when it comes to the Board of Ed and stuff that's happening in the classroom. Is there any?
There is absolutely no role. That's by state statute. That is the superintendent of schools, the state superintendent. They do get recommendations and advice from the state Department of Health and from our health director. So those decisions are entirely made by the superintendent and the Board of Education.
Okay, so how about then at town council meetings? So we went from no masks because, as you said, the vaccine is incredibly effective and seems to be the most effective way to stamp this out, back to masks regardless of the vaccine status. First things first, is that a you decision? Is that a Lamont decision? And what was the impetus to going back to having masks in the town council meetings?
So we had masks here because at that particular time, town hall and the town buildings were having a mask only requirement. The reason why we did that was we wanted to make sure that we did have some members within our government facilities that were not vaccinated at that point. Also, we have some departments that run on one or two people, and if they were to get ill or have to self-quarantine, that could knock out some of the departments. So that's when we were looking at the escalation into the COVID numbers. Now that we've de-escalated those COVID numbers, we've kind of gone back to If you choose to wear a mask within town hall, you can do so. There's not a
When did that
mandate to
happen?
that last week.
Oh, okay.
So once we saw those numbers, I spoke with Lisa Morrissey and said, "Is that something we can loosen up for now?" And she agreed that that's something that we could do. And the same thing that we would do with people with the opportunity. If they want to come in with a mask, they absolutely can do so. Now, there's also the caveat is if you are unvaccinated, no matter where you are, the Governor Lamont's order still is you have to wear a mask.
Okay, so that is from Lamont. Okay.
That is from Governor Lamont, correct. So if you're unvaccinated, you have to wear a mask.
Okay, so
Anywhere that's his that's
any
that
public
executive,
facilities, that's true.
correct.
Okay.
Now, if you're a child 11 years or younger, right? You haven't had a chance to get vaccinated, you are required to wear a mask.
Okay.
So those are still mandates by the governor, and those should be adhered to.
Do you think there's a way, and this is probably a Randy DeBella question, but would you be opposed to looking into a carve out specifically for town council meetings, which are at 7:00 at night? No one else is in that building. The room is huge. You've got great HVAC. The fans are going. And let's be honest, how many people in that room aren't vaccinated? We all know all the town councilmen are. We all know you are. We all know, everyone in that room who speaks regularly is vaccinated. Lisa Morrissey's vaccinated. And I'm not saying I'm not revealing any like secret information. Most of these people I know are vaccinated because they went onto social media and showed a picture of themselves getting vaccinated. Right. So you think that would you be opposed to looking into whether or not could be a carve out for those meetings?
I would think, Mike, that'd be a better question for Attorney DeBella. As a personal thing, I think if we saw numbers turn to the opposite direction, one that would require the town to ask the business community, and if it got even worse, where we kind of went back to where we saw, numbers of individuals where we were limiting the number who could be in a confined space. I would think we'd have to pivot towards masks or going to a remote system where we did prior. So to me, it would just be how this pandemic changes and turns. And if it was to turn where we would have to make that mandate onto the business community, I absolutely think we would be having to do the same thing here at Town Hall.
Even regardless of vaccine status?
It would be all dependent. So, that's kind of a wide-ranging question. So, for instance, right now, I'm vaccinated, as you said, and right now protected against everything. If there's a new variant that came out that made these vaccines kind of obsolete or made their efficacy way lower, then we'd have to recalibrate as to how we protect the health and safety of all of our residents, including our council members. But as of right now, it's if you come to the town hall on Tuesday, because Monday is a holiday, so we're having our town council meeting Tuesday night. If you want to wear a mask to come into town hall and opine, absolutely you can. If you've been vaccinated, you have the ability to not wear a mask if you so choose. If you haven't been vaccinated, you have to wear a mask.
Is that going to be honor system, or are we going to be checking cards at doors?
Currently, right now, that's the honor system.
All right. So the last thing I want to ask you on this topic, as far as the masks in the E. Paul Martin room, because you don't really have any control over the places where there's the greatest contention, which is the Board of Ed. I want to relate to you the statements that have been said to me from people who are, let's say, vaccine hesitant, not vaccine opposed, but the people who at some point have been on the fence and just have been reluctant to get the vaccine. What they've said to me is that when they see that situation where you've got that extremely well-ventilated giant room full of people who have been vaccinated, being forced to wear the masks regardless of the vaccine status, the message that they're telling me is that that's telling them not to get vaccinated. So if you were to believe that that removing the masks in those situations for those who are vaccinated would help get more people vaccinated, would you be opposed to taking that in?
So I would kind of expand on that a little bit, Mike. So, for instance, first of all, I want to premise by saying in no way means am I a doctor or a medical professional. So I got to go by what our professionals, our health director, state health, our doctors, whether they be Dr. K from New Vance, and obviously Dr. Levin, who I rely quite a bit on with his extensive experience. Kind of what our process is, what our thoughts are going to be. So, for instance, first thing comes to mind is right now we all know the vaccine isn't 100% effective. It's not. What it does do, though, is if you do get it, you're not going to be on a ventilator.
Right.
For most of us, right? You're not going to be sick enough to go in the hospital then to make it so they're so overwhelmed. Those with other medical conditions, whether they be a heart attack or whether they be an accident, won't be able to use the facilities. So one of the things we want to make sure of is when you're in those spaces, confined spaces, right? If we're seeing numbers that are in a certain zone, we want to make sure and try and mitigate the type of risk that we would have. We'd be able to do that. So it's all about risk mitigation. So I'm hoping there are times where we don't have to go back into those type of things, but we need to be able to have the ability to pivot to do that in case the data shows that we need to do that.
Yeah, so I want to give you just a little bit of pushback. I actually think that what you just said suggests the vaccines are effective. What we care about is outcomes, and what they seem to do is help with outcomes. And as far as transmission, as far as Delta is concerned, they don't seem to be all that effective as far as transmission is concerned. But who cares? If you get a little cough and a sniffle for a day or two, who cares, right?
Absolutely, and I am a big advocate, as we just talked about before, Mike. I've gotten vaccinated myself, and I hope that people that have not gotten vaccinated, please kind of take a look at the information. You make that decision yourself. But I think that, when you see the vaccination numbers here in New Milford, I believe we're at over 70% with first dose. And you can see our numbers the way that they are. I think that's been a big, huge driver in New Milford's ability to come out of, an orange zone into a yellow zone, and shows a different level of protection for those that may need it.
So on that note, then, do you think it's possible to be pro-vax and also anti-mandate?
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, so I think you could be pro-vaccination and anti-mask, but we also have to look at what the government, besides on a federal and on a state level, what they're requesting the citizens to do. I know that sounds kind of
like a
wishy-washy, Mike. I wish I had a better answer, but if it's requested and if a mask does help a little bit and you're required to do so, especially if you're unvaccinated, then maybe it's something you need to do.
Will you require town employees to get vaccinated?
Right now, it's a choice. I know the state has mandated that, but as of right now, the town has not mandated. On the town side, I know that teachers, I believe, are required to do so, bus drivers, or get the test. And the same is here on the town side, is if you are not vaccinated, you're going to be required at some point to be able to take that test. I believe teachers have to do that now, I believe.
Yeah, they already do. And
bus drivers too, I think.
From what I can tell in the town of New Milford, when it comes to the teachers, almost all of them are vaccinated. So
very, 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 very high rate.
Yeah. So on that note, though, that decision to hand down the vaccine mandates to the town employees, is that a you decision or is that a Ned Lamont decision?
Right now, it would be a town hall decision, but the governor at any point in time, he could make that decision to do that.
So, okay, well then in that case, what would be going too far for you? What would be what would be something that would be worthy of standing up to from coming down from Hartford?
In what respect? I mean, I think each person has an individual choice to decide to get vaccinated or not. I think myself, it would behoove, because you have vaccine hesitancy. I think the more that we could inform the public and to give more information, and I think especially from those in the scientific community, to give more and more information to the public, I think it gives us more and more of an opportunity for people to choose to be able to do that. Now, there may become some point in time, Mike, where the variants are running in a different way, which may cause more mortality issues than they currently are now. And so in that case, then there may be a change to that. But right now, our opinion here, or my opinion in town hall is, as of right now, it's a choice. Please get informed and then make the decision for yourself. But then with that also comes, if you're not going to get vaccinated, at least on the town side, you're going to have to do those weekly tests to make sure that you're not really pushing the virus forward.
So not to get too international here, but you're familiar with what's been happening in Australia, correct?
Absolutely.
So if Ned Lamont came down and enforced the town to enforce, say, regulations like what we're seeing in Australia in certain cases, would you be opposed to actually enforcing it? What I'm asking is, what is the line? What is Ned Lamont crossing the line for you?
Ned Lamont would be crossing the line for me is if he were putting people in jail, or if he was fining people thousands upon thousands of dollars to cross a mandate. I'm more of the person that's more of an optimistic person. I believe if we educate our public, our community, and show them the benefits of doing a certain thing, I think those benefits will far outweigh being able to force something on somebody. Will there be a group within the public that will be against anything? Absolutely, there will be. There'll be that small segment. But I'm very hopeful, and I've seen it before, where the more we can inform our public, I think we'll get more people that will decide to make the best choice for them. And as far as vaccines, we've seen, speaking with Lisa, we saw, again, continued more people, as you've seen the numbers going up a little bit in New Milford, that are getting their first dose, that see the advantages to doing so.
So last question on COVID before we move on to what to expect moving forward. Everything we've talked about so far is a risk calculation, right? So do you believe in zero COVID, and is that the goal?
My personal belief is in this, and again, I preface this to those watching, I am not a doctor, in no means. I'm only going off the data that's provided to me. I don't think we'll ever be at zero COVID.
So that should not be the goal then, correct?
I think COVID will be here for many, many years, and it's how, just like the flu, and it's how we, but a deadlier version, obviously, but how we manage COVID. Okay. With both vaccines, I believe a new pill is being tested now that will create protection, I think, of up to like 50%. So I think with humankind's ability to pivot and use their intelligence to come up with ways to protect our community, I think that's going to be a saving grace. But I don't think we're going to be at zero anytime soon.
Okay, and so that's not the goal on here, is zero COVID?
I think the goal has been, at least in my own opinion, as was stated in the very beginning, is to make it so that people don't get so sick that they have to go to the hospital. And then when they're in the hospital, if they continue to get worse, be stuck on a ventilator. So the goal is to use treatments so that if someone was to get COVID, it would be a very, very, very mild case, and they could come on and still continue with their quality of life. But you do see people are still in the hospital and are still suffering from bad cases of COVID. A lot of that, not all, but a lot of that is the unvaccinated. So again, kind of circling all the way back to your first part of the conversation, Mike, is, well, these vaccines and these treatments are to just make sure that, it's not a death experience, that COVID's going to be here for quite some time.
Well, that's enough on COVID. So let's move on. I'm
Okay.
sure you're glad to move on. This is something we've been talking about for 2 years now, and I hate talking about it. So I'm sick of it, to be honest. So let's try to get through this as quickly as I can. So I'll try to get rid of some of these questions here that aren't really all that important.
Sure.
One of the few looking forward, one of the few things that we know about every year as we talk about the local politics is the budget. This isn't DC. We're not dealing again with problems that are going to take, generally speaking, decades and decades to resolve. We aren't dealing with however many $1 trillion in debt that we have to deal with. It's all stuff that is handled mostly ad hoc, right? Like you take the problem as it comes to you, and it's really difficult to see what those problems are going to be, what those issues are going to be. With the one exception being the annual budget, we run into that every year. Every year, it's a hot button topic. So let's start with this actually. So I was going to ask you about what you think the role in the process should be, but that'll probably wind up revealing itself.
Okay.
The voter turnout at the last budget referendum was much lower than it's been in a long time. And it's been trending downward during your 4 years. You want to speak to why you think that might be, and if you think that's a problem, what you might want to do to get those numbers up if you think it's a problem at all?
Well, I would hope that any resident or taxpayer in New Milford, so those, if you have property here in New Milford, you are also able to vote on the budget. I think the more that are involved in the process is better. I do think when people have been doing this now for quite some time, Mike, not only as a mayor, but before that I was on town council, I was on economic development, I was on economic development corporation, sewer, started at zoning board of appeals. When people seem happy, when they seem content with things, that's when you kind of see the numbers trending a little lower because they feel satisfied with the budget. But I still would like to see more people come to the voting booth to give their stamp of approval on the budgets as they move forward, and also would like to see more people when it comes to our budget hearings as well.
So one of the things that you've really rallied on the back of is the at least stagnation or declining of the mill rates. So I think that kind of speaks towards your guiding principles when it comes to taxation in general. So what is your guiding principle when it comes to taxation, especially at the municipal level?
So at least my thought process is with this is trying to maximize the taxpayer dollar the best way we can and use that dollar to really go as far as it can on different things. So whether it be a capital item, using those funds to do roofs, roads, and also look at the operations piece and how can we run it more effectively, more efficiently. And in so doing, that helps in quite a number of things. So first, it obviously helps with what we charge the taxpayer as far as their property taxes, which is the mill rate. And for the last 2 years, our mill rate has gone down. Now, some people have said, well, Pete, the mill rate's gone down, but my taxes have gone up. So if I could just take a minute, Mike, and kind of explain to the public what the mill rate is. So the mill rate is what we charge you on the value of your property. So, and just kind of an analysis. If you had a home and your home was valued in the last budget,
use 100,000.
Right? We'll use $100,000. You would be paying X amount of dollars, right? So if the home was still valued this year at $100,000, your taxes would go down. But here's the really good news. If your taxes went up, it's because the value of your property went up.
So it's no longer valuized at 100,000. It's say 120.
Exactly.
And I realize, just for folks at home, yeah, I know there's no such thing as a house in this area that's worth $100,000. I was just using a nice even round number to work with.
And here's the beauty of that, Mike, as well as overarchingly for most people, their number one investment is their home. So if you have your home values growing, that's going to be extremely beneficial to you in a number of ways. One, if you decide to retire and move away, when you sell your home, you're going to get more money for your house. If you decide that you need to refinance to do some of those renovations that you want to do, well, you have equity built into your property to be able to do so. And we're very fortunate as New Milford to be able to do that. There are some towns where their property values have gone down.
Yeah. So it seems to me like your guiding principle is that taxation isn't good on itself. It's kind of like a necessary thing to do when you want to fund a town, but really it should be as limited as we can reasonably do it.
Correct. And use those monies as most efficiently as we possibly can. Now, there'll be times when the budget will go up as it does, but there's ways that we're going to try and help mitigate that with using surplus funds to buy capital requirements, capital items. That takes it off of future requests for taxes. We're doing an energy program now with the Board of Education where we're taking the savings that will be from the new energy equipment that we're going to be purchasing, taking that, and that differential is going to pay for those new energy and capital requirements that is needed by both the Board of Education and the town. On the Board of Ed side, it was 11 million. On the town side, it's 4 million. So now we don't have to go to the taxpayer for that additional $15 million for that much needed capital. So it's looking at different ways, different strategies to maximize that investment of our taxpayer.
So you actually just brought up the tax surplus. And as you're, I'm sure, aware, every year for the past 4 years, there's been a fairly substantial surplus in the budget, which for those at home that don't understand what that means the budget is just how much money we expect to expend on the town side. Let's say it's $38 million. And then at the end of the year, if we wind up only spending $37 million, there's $1 million surplus. That's extra money. From a legal standpoint, there's some weirdness as to like what you can actually do with that money, but we won't get into the legal side of things because that's, like I said, kind of weird. But this has kind of been a topic that the big talking point of your opposition. So let's address this right here and now.
Absolutely.
Why is there a surplus?
So the last 2 years has been a large surplus due to COVID. That's
okay, in the previous 2 years,
reason.
That's everyone's going to forgive that. How about the last 2 years?
That's what I'm saying. The last 2 years. The 2 years before that.
Yeah.
The 2 years before that, also on top of that, to make it more confusing for our public, is not only is it the difference in the expenditures from what you're expending, but also you get additional revenues. So for instance, the state, we may budget a certain amount for state revenues, and the state may give us more that year. So you got to include that. On top of that, you also have to include, right, our growth in our revenues. When it comes to commercial. So we've seen commercial growth. So what we budgeted for when new projects come online, right? That's additional revenue that we get that we wouldn't have put into the budget because it hadn't come online that particular year, and then it did. So you've seen larger tax receipts. So when you combine those things where you've had a savings in some of our budgetary items. You had COVID for these last 2 years,
which is threw everything off. Yeah,
you threw everything off line, and then you've had additional revenues that have come in that were non-budgetary. That produces a surplus for you.
So as far as the expenses are concerned, then have they been pretty close to on the dot?
These last 2 years,
not the last 2 years. I don't care about those. That's COVID.
Yeah,
it's just going to happen.
Yeah, so operationally they've been pretty close, but we've had some savings. I mean, I go through the budget every week with our department heads, and we go over where are we in the budget, what does it look like, what are some of the savings we can look like, how does all this work, how does all this measure. So we go through all of those things and continue to do so each week to see if there's ways we could squeeze out some additional savings.
So those cost savings then are an ongoing thing rather than just simply missing the mark?
Well, for COVID now, the real big numbers, that was because there was stuff that we couldn't get done during COVID. So those numbers kind of fell to what we call the bottom line. So we had the availability, once those big numbers, the Board of Ed had similar for these last 2 years. So then the thought process is there's a couple things that you can do. If you have those big surpluses, you can let them fall to the bottom line. And for some towns, that's a very beneficial thing to do because it replenishes what's called their undesignated, their reserve, so to speak.
Real quick, what do you mean by fall to the bottom line?
So in other words, that money now has to go somewhere. That's surplus funds. It would have to, if you're not going to use them, then it would go into what they call an unassigned or undesignated fund. And that's kind of your reserve.
Yeah. Could that ever be issued as just a straight tax refund, or is that something that would have to be used as a way of funding a budget for a budget year, let's say?
So there's different things you could look at. So first and foremost, you got to look at what is the best financial way to take hold of your taxpayer. So when we looked at it, there's a couple things we could do. We could let it go fall to the bottom line, right? And in so doing, falling to the bottom line, it would then raise your reserve. Right now, we are at about 18% reserve, which is plenty, according to our auditors.
Is there
The
a good
next thing,
reason to reduce that?
to reduce the reserve,
To reduce that percentage, yeah.
it would be like a one-time issue if you had a major catastrophe, but you want to keep it like that.
Like a tornado blowing a roof off.
Correct. Like the capital markets really like to see that you have reserve funds available in case of an emergency. So those type of things, not kind of segueing off the piece, but when you're looking at your like Standard and Poor's and Moody's, when they're reviewing your debt to the credit markets, they love to see that you have those type of reserves.
And yeah,
which
that
is
helps
very important.
just for people at home, so this doesn't get too like off into the weeds on the technical side of things. Basically, what he's saying is that when we go to bond things, we can get a lower interest rate. So
Correct.
So speaking of that,
So then, I'm sorry, Mike. So then what happens is then you have another avenue to look at it is, could we take those funds, repurpose them for items that we would normally in the next budget or the budgets after, could we get those now? And in so doing that, we make sure that we cost avoid future tax increases. So we're putting that money to work today rather than having it go back to you and then hit you up for additional taxes.
Okay, so then as far as the surplus, the annual surpluses that we've been getting, 2 years are COVID surpluses, and then the previous 2 years, just to sum up what you've been saying, and correct me if I'm getting any of this wrong, largely due to unexpected revenue streams, and what little there has been in terms of unexpected cost savings has been ad hoc cost savings, as in things that you've done throughout the middle of the year that were not anticipated during the budget. Do I have that mostly correct?
Correct. Or a program may not be run for whatever reason it could be. So you may not have a program within a department.
Not enough people signed up for it or something.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So you'd see that.
Do you have any intention in closing that gap then, so that whatever we're budgeting for is much closer to what we wind up running into?
So right now, we're pretty much on the mark because we're more in tune to a normal budget. Because those last 2 years were major anomalies, major anomalies. So this year we're pretty much going to be, as of right now, unless there becomes a tremendous change, we're on target to kind of hit our numbers versus those extremely large surpluses that both the town and the Board of Ed side saw. So the conjecture of very large budget surpluses, unless there's a major change in COVID that stops programs and stops the ability to do things, get projects done, I think we're going to be right on target for our budget.
Okay, and then the last thing on the budget, and this should be, again, a pretty straightforward answer here because, again, this is another talking point, a major talking point of the opposition. Just real quick, real straightforward. Has the Board of Education budget ever been cut?
The Board of Education budget has never been cut. The request for the budget increase has been adjusted, but it has never been cut. Actually, you can't go below the budgetary number that you had the year prior.
Without jumping through major hoops. Yeah.
Correct. And now another thing that maybe the opposition side has not talked about, and I think the public needs to know, all of the debt that goes on for the school buildings is on the town side. The town pays for all that debt. So not only has this administration given more to the schools than any other administration, more, we've also done more. So I'm going to give you an example, Mike. The Sarah Noble School roof. I had the teaching staff come to me and talk to me about how the roof leaked, how there were issues. I met with our Board of Ed partners and we did the roof. That debt is on the town side. We are now doing the New Milford High School roof. That debt will go on the town side. We did the Hill and Plain oil tanks. We took surplus funds to do that. We did the East Street. We took town surplus funds and did that. Athletic uniforms, Mike, that were 10, 12 years old. We repurposed town surplus to get them new uniforms. to get them new band equipment. Also did playgrounds. We did the Sarah Noble playground. Did that with town funds. Also did the tennis courts at the high school. They did a great job, by the way. We used town funds for that. So it's a collaborative partnership, but to say that the town has not fully funded the Board of Education, to me, is misleading, misinformation, and truly false. Just look at the numbers and you'll see.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that's as straightforward as it comes. So the next two topics, hopefully we can just get through these pretty quickly, just because it's our ongoing things. And again, this is what people can expect moving forward. ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. Just real brief so people know, we're getting a ton of federal funding. It's $7.9 million. We're kind of chin-strapped as to how we can spend this. Randy DeBella has been pretty emphatic about the fact that it's got to be tied to something, at least COVID, and all of the things that I would think would be most reasonable to do when you have that sort of surplus. You know, give a tax break to everybody, stuff like that. You can't do that. All of the things you can't invest it in a long-term fund. You can't use it to offset on existing capital expenditures that have already been spent to pay back a bond, for example. So all those things. So basically what we do is we, like you said, you have to spend the money. Right. So just real quick, the next public meeting, which we talked about earlier, for that is next week. Pete, do you remember the exact date and time?
It is next Tuesday. I believe is it the 12th?
12th.
The 12th, Mike, I think it is.
Okay. And is that before the town council meeting? I think it's 6:30.
Oh, the next public meeting?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. The next public meeting is right before the Board of Finance meeting.
On Wednesday.
They're having it there on Wednesday. I apologize. Yes.
Yeah, 6:30 on Wednesday the 13th. So, folks, this is a lot of money. There's a lot of money. It's going to go a long way. If you want to the Board of Finance is here, the town is here to hear your input. Please do go to that meeting and give them your recommendations. So, thoughts on all of that. Your role in that process, beyond just fielding recommendations that you're going to feed to the town council, where do you think your role is in all of that?
So my role, Mike, is to help facilitate and provide recommendations also to the town council on the needs that I see that I've gotten from both our public and also from our department heads and our different departments, also our nonprofit community and our community at large. So I brought, I believe it's now up to 39 different requests that we've now gone through the town council for the last couple of weeks since July. We've been kind of going through these and with different updates and going over what some of the requests are that the departments have made that make a lot of difference. That this money could go a very long way in doing a couple things. One, bringing us up to par on some things. And two, making sure that we're not going to the taxpayer for the same appropriation that we could do with this American relief funding. And I'll give you just a couple examples, Mike. So first, for those that know, we have a dam. It's called the Reservoir Dam that the town has had for many years. Due to all this extensive rain we've had the last couple summers, it's kind of been weeping. Jack Healy and his team went and took a look at the dam, and the dam is going to need to be fixed. And we've had estimates. The estimates are going to be $1.2 million. So what I told the town council is we have a couple of ways to do it. One, we could use the American Relief Funds to fix the dam at no cost to the taxpayers. Or two, the town council could choose to do half or not do anything at all. And then in next year's budget, there's going to be a request to get the dam fixed. So to me, to fix the dam using this money and not affecting the taxpayers is a great use of this money. Another a thought process too with this as well is looking at first responders and how we help them, whether it be for the fire department, additional software they need to communicate within the whole first responder network, police, fire, ambulance. The ambulance needs a new ambulance themselves. They need new gear. So these are some of the things that we're tackling where instead of putting it into taxes in the next year or the year after, we can do it through the American Relief Funds thus providing that much needed equipment that they need, but also not hitting the taxpayers for it.
Are they going to go to referendum?
Yes, the process, as we spoke about before, is to ask whatever appropriation happens is going to go through three processes. First, the town council would approve a appropriation or and appropriation. It then would go to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance would then have to approve it, and then it would go to a town meeting so that everybody through the whole process has plenty of time to give input. You also can give input. We have in a number of ways. We've done a survey. We had over 700 respondents to that, and they talked overwhelmingly of like infrastructure and public safety, where they want to see it go. We've also told people you can email the town council at towncouncil@newmilford.org or the mayor's office, which people have done to express what they would like to see with the American Relief Funds. You also can come to a town council meeting or a public hearing, as we had at the last town council meeting, or before the Board of Finance meeting. This all gives the people ample opportunity to give their input, as we want to make this a very, very, very transparent process.
So real quick, I'm just going to throw out some ideas for you. You let me know, just, real short thoughts on what you think of them. And I say short because the role of the mayor in this process, as you described, is really just more as an ex officio in the process. So the town council is the one that really would be making most of these decisions. And if you were a councilman, I'd be grilling you on which items like you think are worth considering over others. So just real quick, since these are the ones that I've been getting, thoughts on grants getting to teachers. Dave Lawson, I think, brought up $1,000 to just hand out to the teachers.
So Dave Lawson and Mary Jane Lundgren brought this up. And the question that I posed to them was, though that's very noble, the teachers did a phenomenal job, but what about all the other first responders? What about the town employees? What about the waitress that lost her job due to COVID because at that particular time, Governor Lamont basically squeezed out any way to go inside to eat? What about the person that's bagging your groceries or ringing out the cash register? Those funds, if you go that way, you're going to burn through all of the money by just giving out $1,000 bonuses. What I recommend, and I recommend to the town council, is why don't we make the workplace for the teachers better? So for instance, and our students. So for instance, we had to close for 3 days during the heat in August due to the heat and having no air conditioning. So why don't we use those funds to help us get those air conditioning and much needed infrastructure in our schools? I think that will overarchingly help our teachers who suffer through that heat, as well as our students.
All right, how about the idea I threw out? I think it was two episodes of the Mike Sennello Show ago. It was either the last one or the one before that. So forgive me, folks, but you guys can check that out. This is my idea. Love to hear your thoughts on, since there's been an explosion in homeschooling over the last year or two, I'd love to hear your thoughts on homeschool vouchers.
I think that would be better used through the State Department of Education. Again, we have limited resources. And what I mean by Mike, these are all noble ideas, right? But the 35, I believe, 35 recommendations I made to the town council, and we can go over some of them if you'd like, would be, if approved, we would be at $7.5 million just with that.
All right.
So it's like, what do you kind of base it on? Things that that you're going to really need to do right now, or within the next year, and do that and offset the taxes, or do you do it on making more of a grander scheme kind of thing that way, for a better term? So some of the things that we talked about was, real quick, Mike, was the health, to provide additional health services is $240,000. The Senior Center Advisory Board was like $71,137. What happened with the Senior Center, the Advisory Board, was when we went into COVID and migrated out of COVID, or in COVID, was that the Senior Center was locked down, obviously, because they were the most vulnerable. Well, we went and supplied meals that was supplied by the state. Well, the state didn't give us a full reimbursement. They only gave us a partial for that, so that the Senior Center Advisory Board funded that additional monies. The Senior Center Advisory Board also helps our seniors in many ways. If they need assistance with a utility bill or a phone bill. It's just an example. They help that out. So this would replenish that fund. The fire marshal, he's requesting $15,900 for fire packs that are well needed and overdue.
So before you go on any further, you said this is a list of 35 things, Pete?
Yep.
All right. So what I recommend for everybody who wants to see this, Pete explained all this at the last town council meeting. He ran through the numbers. He ran through the rationale.
Absolutely.
Go check out the town's YouTube channel. Check it out. He already did all this. We don't need to,
Gotcha.
Take up another 45 minutes with something you've already done before. So
Gotcha.
Again, on the town councils, on the Town of New Milford YouTube channel, just look at the last town council meeting. Everything's got its label, so you can just jump to the American Rescue Plan Act, and Pete's gone through the whole list there. Last thing on the affordable, the ARPA. What are your thoughts on affordable housing? And I want to say, every time I bring up affordable housing, I have to differentiate between capital A, affordable, capital H housing, and lowercase a, affordable, lowercase h housing.
So affordable housing, I think, is much needed in New Milford. And what do you mean by affordable housing? So for me, it means this: workforce housing. So you have the first starting out nurse, or you have the police officer, or you have the teacher, or you have the person working in Big Y, or the restaurants. They need a place to live. If they don't live here, they're going to live somewhere else. And shows that the more stable your ecosystem is economically, allowing for people to get the first rung of either home ownership or rental owners or rental, they tend to be more stable within the community where they're at, and they'll purchase their first home within that community. It really kind of makes the ecosystem much stronger. With that being said, New Milford is affordable to a lot of people right now, comparative to other towns. And one of the things I've asked State Representative Buckby to look at, and also up in Hartford to look at, is what the true meaning of affordable is. So for you to count, so for the state to count New Milford, they want you up to 10% of your housing stock to be affordable. So I mentioned this at the last town council meeting. Well, what they deem affordable is your house, right? Or where you are or have rented. The ownership of that has to be deed restricted, meaning that there's a cap on what the value or what you could sell that property for to be deemed affordable. And my belief is, well, that takes away from somebody that's starting out in a new home. Right now, as you've seen the housing inventory here in New Milford, the value greatly increased. Well, that person now is capped on their ability to make that additional equity to go buy another home if they so choose. So my thing had always been is there should be a availability to look at the pricing structure comparative to other towns and use that marker as the affordability, not capped at deed restriction. Also, you can use for, I'm kind of getting in the weeds, Mike, and I know.
Yeah.
But to get deemed home affordable, if you're purchasing, you can use some state financing, whether it be what they call CHAFA, which is the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, or a USDA loan. So we're going to be fully focused coming out into December and then into the winter months and the buying market in the spring, of educating our population on those particular loan products that really help the first-time home buyer when they come to purchasing their home. So it's looking at different ways to really quantify what affordable housing is. Some people will lead you to believe that New Milford wants the federally funded section, they call it Section 8 housing, all up and down Route 7 on Young's Field, believe it or not, which is an absolute miscommunication and bold-faced lie. And I will 100% say that. We like affordable housing that lets people, workforce housing, that lets people live where they work. And lastly, Mike, Young's Field itself, so that everybody can hear it, as I've said many times, will remain a green space. It will still be a green space. There will be no buildings on Young's Field Road. And anything around it, where DPW is, where we would be moving it, would have to go to a town meeting. but there will absolutely 100% not be buildings on Youngs Field Road. I mean, on Youngs Field itself. And for those that told you that, they're giving you a bunch of misinformation.
Well, on that, that's actually my next topic here, and it'll be the last major topic here before we start getting into Q&A, wrapping things up and getting into Q&A. What you just talked about is basically part of the scope of the Riverfront Revitalization Committee. Before we start, everything Pete just said, everything we're going to get into, again, their presentation is on the town's YouTube channel, New Milford. You can just search on YouTube, Town of New Milford, and you can then search just Riverfront, and it's got its own standalone video where we cleaned up the audio, we trimmed everything. It's 1080p. If you guys are interested in all that whole process, it's a 30 to 35 minute presentation. Watch that presentation, and it explains everything in great detail that they're doing. And this is not me even endorsing necessarily everything they're doing. This is just saying, like, it's the information's out there. So go get it. But on that note, just the two things I wanted to talk about when it comes to that, because this is definitely an ongoing project that they described as being a potentially multi-decade project and not
Correct.
just a multi-month or multi-year project. So one of the major topics that is being discussed is the moving of DPW to the Century Brass site. I'd love to know where that idea came from. We don't need to get into the details as to how that would come to fruition. And my thoughts are that it's probably going to wind up taking several years to get that to happen. So I would love to know where that comes from, that idea.
Yeah, great question, Mike. That actually came when the town was looking to get the revolving loan funds to remediate Century Brass. At that time, Mayor Murphy proposed moving the DPW to the Century Brass site. And that's actually part of the documents that were put in to get some of those revolving loan funds and grants. When you take a look at Public Works, you could see that it's way under capacity. A lot of our vehicles that we spent quite a lot of money sit outside for that. And the town being the largest landmass town in the state, you do know that it requires a lot of vehicles and a lot of equipment
per capita,
to maintain
that.
Lot
more than any other town.
Yeah. So the goal was during Mayor Murphy's administration to move it. And I wholeheartedly then and wholeheartedly now agree that that's the right move, moving that facility to Public Works, building a state-of-the-art facility down there to house our Public Works team, and then using remediating that property that DPW sits on now and looking at ways to revitalize that area.
So would one of those options then be to relinquish some of that property potentially to the private sector?
Absolutely. It could be that, which so the public knows that would have to be done by a town meeting. The public would have full input on that. Anything we do with this revitalization has public input. It can't be just like waving a magic wand and we're just going to do it. We need full public support of doing anything when it comes to revitalizing that area or any other area that town property is involved in.
So on that note, actually, we're going to skip a few questions because we're way over on time. Thanks for joining me, Pete. But we'll just skip to the last thing here. You talked about transparency. I am with Lisa Hida. I want to get rid of that word because transparency refers to something completely different. The word that everyone keeps looking for is daylight. And so, Lisa, I don't know if you're watching, but I'm totally on board with you. The word is daylight. And it's become another topic. First things first, are you on board with dropping transparency and talking about daylight?
Sounds great.
All right,
sounds
cool.
great to me.
All right. Transparency is when you're providing like a shell that you can't see through and people can't see what your actual intentions are. Daylight is just saying, well, here's actually what's happening, not necessarily what my true intentions are. So I think daylight is the word that everybody keeps talking about. But that's also been a major.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So that's actually been a major talking point of your opposition to this year. So just briefly, I'll just ask the question straight up. What are you doing to ensure daylight in the office and in all of these processes we've been talking about tonight?
So, we can start with American Relief Funding. As you can see, we're following the guardrails of when we're looking at appropriations, having the Town Council, Board of Finance, and the public being the final arbiter of that. As far as transparency, making sure that we let our public know what's going on. And I think our administration has been above and beyond creating more daylight than the other administrations before me. And that has a lot to do with technology too. So I'm not taking away from the previous administrations. For instance, we created Notify New Milford. So now if you decide to opt into that, you're going to be getting specifics on when road work is going to get done, when there's weather events, all in efforts to inform you, the public, of what's going on. We also do the virtual town hall meetings you and I talked about a little while ago from the mayor to giving you additional updates and input. The mayor's office, we also have a newsletter that we put out at least twice a week. If you want to opt into that, you can go to www.milford.org. You can go to the left-hand side and you can click community, I believe, and then you can click mayor's newsletter, and you'll get that newsletter as well. Also, what we've done is I've let all the department heads know that prior to our administration, you had to go ahead and ask permission to either talk to people or to send out your own press releases. I've told all of our department heads is 100% talk to anybody at any time. The public is our boss, and relay whatever information that they are requesting for, and also put out as many press releases as we can, letting the public know and be informed of all the wonderful things that we're doing here in town. I've also put my cell phone out for those that want to contact me. You can also contact me via the Facebook pages that we have, mayor's page, and also via my emails. So all in efforts to make sure that if you have a question or information that we have, we can push it out to you at the best way possible so that you can get that information. All right. So I think daylight, we absolutely want it, applaud it. If there's more ways to do it, we're all about it.
Super. So just real quick, because I got like another page and a half here. I'm just going to skip and get the ones that I think are fun that I think we can do in like a sentence or two.
Gotcha.
So I used to love your State of the Towns. You're going to do one this year if you
Absolutely.
get elected? All right.
Yes.
Let's see. Debates. So we normally have a debate between the mayors. Do we have any word from the League of Women Voters?
I would absolutely love a debate. I'm counting on that we're going to have a debate, and I'm hoping that we can solidify that within the next week. I would look forward to it. That'd be great.
If it doesn't happen with the League of Women Voters, because I like the in-person debates better, would you accept my invitation here to come on if Ted Hine is willing to accept the invitation too?
Absolutely.
To just do it here virtually if the League of Women Voters aren't going to do it.
What I like to see, Mike, is we do it in person.
I would too, but if they're not going to do it,
we can do it. We can do it outside.
Oh, all right.
I'm all for a debate.
The reason I say the virtual piece is just because to replicate what the League of Women Voters does on a moment's notice is really hard. So that's why I said virtual. Yep. But all right, the last one. We've never had any town council debates. Do you think would you want to see some town council debates too?
That would be great. I know that I believe a couple years ago that you had somewhat similar kind of a debate, which was down at Oddfellows. So I'd like to see the opportunity of maybe it's at Oddfellows right now. Maybe you could set something up like that where you had the public come in and talk to the candidates about that. I know the PTO is doing that for the Board of Ed, so that'd be great. That way the public can kind of see what's transpiring.
So actually, that's happening at Sarah Noble Intermediate School. The PTO is putting on a Meet the Candidates event on Wednesday the 20th at 7 p.m. So you get to meet the Board of Education candidates there. Hopefully, we'll see the same mixture we had over at Oddfellows that year. We had actually, I think it was 4 different parties represented at that Meet the Candidates event, which was kind of cool. The next one that's coming up more soon is at the Abbey. The RTC is putting on their Meet the Candidates event at the Abbey Wednesday the 13th, 5 to 7 p.m. So you guys can meet Pete in person there if you want. Pete, you are going to attend that?
Yep.
Did you plan on going to the Board of Education candidates event?
I'm gonna try and get there too, kind of do the double duty, so to speak. And also for myself, right? Please feel free to contact me whether I'm walking down the street or email or phone. However, I'm going to be doing when I do have a little bit of time on top of going to different events or doing some door knocking. I'd love to hear from you. Love to first of all tell me how I'm doing, and then on top of that, let me know what concerns or what you'd like to see happen here in New Milford.
And that was the whole goal of tonight. Hopefully, we can get people who, if you don't feel comfortable going up to Pete in person and asking those tough questions, this is the place to do it. So we're just about to go into the Q&A. So folks, if you've been hanging on, you've got any more questions, Put them in the comment section right now. If you're watching at home on YouTube, I'll read off the comments from YouTube. If you're watching at home from Facebook, I'll read off the questions from Facebook as well. So Pete, the last thing before we get into Q&A, just like I said, just like you did at the beginning, how can people reach and follow you?
So as far as the mayor role, you can reach me at pbass@newmilford.org is the email. Cell phone 203-788-2619. Or you can reach me if you so choose on Facebook through Messenger on the mayor's page, or also through Twitter at Town Council Pete, which is directed to the mayor on Twitter as well. Love to hear from you.
Super. So Pete, you ready for some Q&A?
Absolutely.
All right. This is from Susanna. Susanna, I'm going to probably butcher your last name. Padilla.
Hi, Susanna.
So we talked about affordable housing. I think most of this has already been answered, but let's see if we can do this. I'd like to hear what he has to say about the topic of affordable housing for seniors that are on fixed incomes in single-parent homes. Is it possible to have this in a way that doesn't create a ghetto attitude about it?
Absolutely. I think one of the things you can look at is Butterbrook, which is one of our senior housing locations that we have here in New Milford. Indian Trails is another one, but Indian Trails is just solely for seniors. But yes, I think you can do it in a way as long as you have a good working relationship with the developer, and you have the zoning commission and follow really the rules and the character of the town. I think you actually absolutely could create a partnership in which that can happen. Absolutely.
So Matt Roach just wants to send his thanks on behalf of the Lions Club.
Hey, Matt, thank you. And thank you everything the Lions do. Tremendous work here in New Milford and throughout the world. Can't thank them enough.
So I don't know if this is, well, I'm just going to ask you the question without any context. Susanna also asks, isn't Buckbee part of the reason why the delivery fees of Eversource are so high?
I would not be able to opine on that. I don't think that State Representative Buckbee would be the one that would set the rates for Eversource. I believe if you're looking at a government agency to kind of contact about that would be Pura, as they're the ones that are set up to really review Eversource both as an entity serving the public and their fees. So I would definitely entertain speaking with Pura.
Okay, so that was a liked comment. There's a lot of people that responded to that. That actually wraps up our audience Q&A. I guess there's a whole lot of questions for you to field. Hopefully I've done a good job of asking those tough questions. If you guys have liked them, that's great. Like I said, we will be interviewing Eric Hansel on Sunday night at 7 p.m. He's running for the Board of Education. So again, check that out, 7 p.m. I'll get a link out as soon as I can. Pete, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks so much for staying an hour over what we talked about.
Absolutely. And Mike, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for this great interview. And lastly, for me, I just want to thank you, the public, for giving me these last 4 years. I can't thank you enough. It's the best job in the world for the best town in the USA. I'm asking for your vote November 2nd. God bless and thank you, Mike.
Best town in the USA. All
Amen.
Right.
It is.
All right. So good night, everyone. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next
everybody.
one.
Bye-bye.